Hello, everyone. I'm John Lomperis, Director of United Methodist Action for the Institute on Religion and Democracy. I'm joined today by Krystl Johnson. She's a counselor in the Philadephia area, Doctor of Theology candidate, Executive Director of a Crisis Pregnancy Center, a board member of the United Methodist General Board of Higher Education and Ministry, and I will share a fuller bio of her in the text below. But thanks for being with me today, Krystl.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, well, to continue these conversations, let me just start by asking you, Krystl. So when you first found out about what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis, where we're supposed to go someday as delegates,
Yes.
What were some of the things you were thinking and feeling?
Okay. Well, foremost, thank you for isolating what happened to George Floyd from other current and intersecting events. I know that so many issues and incidents, they led up to this moment, and even more consequently happened thereafter. Yet you narrowed it down to this situation. You eliminated who George was and what he did, as well as you excluded all other cops beyond the 4 officers from which were involved in that situation. So I appreciate you foremost for doing that and for making what happened to George Floyd the focus. Ultimately, what happened to George Floyd and to countless others is what all of the looting, rioting, and petitioning and protesting is all about. Guilty or not, George Floyd will never see his day in court because his due process played out for him on a sidewalk. So to answer your question, when I saw an officer place his knee on George's neck for 8 minutes, my initial thought was that was painful to watch. In witnessing this, any rational person should agree that an evil has occurred in the world. I know what the autopsy report says. Whether this had led to his murder or not, Americans stared evil, physically and emotional, painful misuse of power in the face. And that is the biggest issue. You also asked me how I felt, and I say, like, in my head I knew that this was painful, but in my heart I felt numb. I went about my day after I saw the video, and I share this with you because numbness, being desensitized or feeling indifferent to an evil that exists in the world, is a problem. It is no better than being outraged. Why? Because numbness and outrage, they are on opposite sides of the same coin. They are both self-protective reactions to personal or shared feelings of shock, terror, devastation, or even physical pain. And therefore, my numbness wasn't only an indicator that I have been desensitized to an ongoing issue of police brutality, but it unveiled a deeper spiritual concern. I think that Jesus would have cried about this, yet I couldn't. A numb, uninvolved, or unmoved Christian is no good. Like Christ, compassion should always be our go-to emotion. We should not be desensitized to this stuff. How can we stare evil in the face, simply go about our day like I did, and then show up to church on Sunday? It's not right, and it's no way to right any of the wrongs that occur in this world.
Could you say a little more about, you talked about two kind of extremes of numbness being unhelpful because it's kind of a self-protective stepping back from compassion of suffering with the other who is suffering. But could you talked about outrage also being sometimes unhelpful. Could you say more about the other side of that?
Yeah, I would like to say is I think that the church needs to be compassionate because they need to be moved to act, and something has to compel us to want to do something. And there's 4 other reactions that we sometimes demonstrate, and it's fatigue, it's shock, it's outrage, and it's numbness. And the problem with outrage and numbness is I share with people when they say I'm outraged, and I'm like, okay, so that's a reactive emotion. When you are angry, mad, frustrated, it's sometimes a reaction to some type of emotional pain or sadness, or even sometimes a fear. I'm misunderstood, or that really hurts, and now I'm mad. You see how it's always like, there's a catalyst emotion. And so that's also the same for numbness. Prolonged grief, this is never going to get better, this is never going to change, I've tried everything that I had to do, when is it going to work for me? That is what numbness does. And why I say it's the opposite of of outrage is because when I say, when is it going to get better for me, makes you numb. You know, you're just like, it is what it is. Then it's, what do I got to do for somebody to listen to me? That's outrage. Let's let me go loot. Let's go, like, let me go riot. Let me, you know, because peaceful protesting isn't working. I got to cause some destruction and damage thereafter.
In terms of the extreme of outrage, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're can certainly tell that you're a professional counselor in the way you talk about how we manage these reactions. But often in the world of hashtag activism, things get framed in these very kind of mutually exclusive either or kind of ways. Either Black Lives Matter or you back the blue. And what are some of your thoughts about this as somebody who grew up with both of your parents being police officers? What are some of your thoughts specifically on some of the questions and concerns that recent events have highlighted related to policing practices?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because I am Black and blue, I guess. But I'd like to exclude the phrase of being police officers so that the clause now just states as someone who grew up with both of your parents, because we have to acknowledge that the family, fatherhood, and the household, they all play a major role in this situation that we're dealing with and all other situations that are, you know, causing fault and drama in the world. But just for the sake of answering your question, you know, I want to eliminate my parents' profession and credit my response to their personal parental responsibility of raising me and my siblings to grow up to be law-abiding American citizens. Like all other evil, police brutality needs to end. But what they are doing to police right now is insane. Watching mayors and district attorneys bow down to the current mob mentality, which has imperiled police, insane. Therefore, I only have one thought about these policing policies. And it's shame on you. You as in whoever these policymakers are. They are using the plight of African Americans to push their agendas. They are building their arguments upon the backs of Blacks with pseudo cries for racism, fascism, and any other type of issue, including intolerance. And they are crying out accusations of racism or even sellout isms to anyone who does not comply with the mob mentality. I believe that defunding the police is the first step to a well laid out socialist plan. And they need the Black vote to execute it. They do not care about police brutality, which means when a cop misuses his power or deliberately hurts, harm, or murders a citizen. If so, reform would have been on the docket a long time ago. What they really want is universal health care, to redistribute wealth and to obtain power to determine how we ought to execute public safety. Now, if those are the policies that they want to pass, they have a right to do it. They can go ahead and they can pursue it. But don't strip our police of institutional support. Don't create untrue narratives about racism. Don't politicize our hashtags or kneel in kente clothing. Don't exploit the memory of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and even Breonna Taylor to do so either. It's dishonest, it's despicable, and it's unjust.
Mm-hmm. How would you respond to those who say the way we've done policing in this country and the extent of brutality is too extreme, has gone too far to just merit a few piecemeal reforms of banning chokeholds or adding more body cameras or other things, but that we need to radically reform the whole police thing, and that this is a matter often framed in terms of, particularly as it relates to Minneapolis, and us being in Minneapolis as General Conference delegates, has been framed in terms of will all delegates feel safe in Minneapolis, in that city where George Floyd was killed?
I guess I could best speak to the fact that we are going to be there September 2021, and a lot of delegates from all sides have expressed concerns. They realize that when the state is not there to enforce or laws or protect us, you know, who do we turn to and who do we call on if there's an issue? You know, a lot of these autonomous zones, when someone gets hurt, they're calling the police. You know, and so I think that police are needed. I think that reform should be considered, but they need to think about how what they do impacts everything else. if you get rid of police, or if you take away their institutional support, which means every time they do something, they're going to get in trouble for it, and you're going to put the hammer on them, they're going to stop showing up to work. You know, there's this new term that came out called blue flu. It means organized police decisions to call out sick. And so,
on the same day.
yes. So the fact that police are scared to do their job, then you have law-abiding citizens that are scared of a mob. You know, everybody's safety becomes at risk. And you know, I think it's a lot, like, you know, needs to be a lot more conversation about it and around it for even myself to have a rational, you know, opinion and understanding of all of this that is coming to place. But right now we just need to simmer down and really talk about what is the problem, what is wrong, and what is at risk. Because when I look at the statistics, and it's quite clear that a lot of people have never had to write a research paper before or had to research before. You know, when I look at statistics, you know, it doesn't add up to complete reform or complete abolishment of police. And so I think that we need to really take our emotions out of it for a minute, think about some of the facts and the logics, and then, you know, especially those who claim to be Christians, add that Christian compassion to the conversation. And, you know, ask God for wisdom, and ask for the Holy Spirit to lead us in these conversations. Because other than that, we're going to be led by people who just want destruction, who just want, you know, anarchy. And I think that's what a lot of the mob mentality is all about. How do we destroy something and contribute to the chaos? And I'm not for that. I'm not with it.
Well, I mean, it's important, of course, to distinguish between, you know, as I know you do, between the peaceful protesters who are just First Amendment, holding a sign or handing out leaflets or whatever, and those who see an opportunity to mess some things up or break windows or steal from Target or whatever.
Yeah, I love peaceful protesting. You know, I think that was one of the things that people think about most when they look back on Black history is peaceful protesters. I actually wanted to send you a picture. There was a baby, a dad let the kid color in a sign. He had to be nothing but a toddler, so it was scribble scrabble, and he was on his dad's shoulder holding up a sign, and it was just a little cute baby who was out there protesting. And I was like, wow, like that was something that was you know, it was a light moment to the movement, especially because people were retweeting what he said and said, I agree with everything this baby says, and it was just a really cute moment I had to share.
Thanks. Well, in terms of the church's role, you know, a couple weeks ago, I asked you if you could recommend any resources or authors for me as a white guy to better understand racial dynamics in our country. And among the things you sent me was a link to a YouTube video that was a dialogue between two pastors, a Black and a white pastor. And there was one point in this that stood out to me where the white pastor talked about how he was a pastor of a diverse, multi-ethnic megachurch, and he was talking about how he would not have integrity if he would celebrate the diversity he had in his congregation as kind of a window dressing, or look at all the different colored faces I can put up on the website kind of thing, and just stayed at that shallow level. But he never actually took the time or trouble to really go deeper and listen to and address some of the widespread and painful experiences of many of his African American members of his flock. So for people who are watching this and who are white pastors of diverse congregations, or individuals who have some kind of leadership position, including maybe as general conference delegates of ethnically diverse denominations, what are your thoughts on what it should look like for us to move beyond just the window dressing of celebrating, yay, look at this picture of, you know, we got a Black guy, an Asian woman, a Latina, and a white guy all in the same picture kind of thing, to actually really go deeper and listen to and address some experiences, and disparities faced by particularly our African American sisters and brothers.
Oh wow, that's a really great question. I'm glad you posed that for the pastors. I guess that I would say that I would hope that as a priority, the pastors would work to diminish the idea of identity politics within his or her church. Purposely, I did not identify anyone as a white person or a Black person when I was speaking to you today. And when you asked me a question about my parents, I immediately distanced myself from the label cop kid. And it's because I think that I need to stop calling you the white guy in the room, and you need to stop calling me your Black sister. Otherwise we are subscribing to the unity hindering labels that fuel identity politics. Identity politics says, shut up, you don't know my life. So how can a white pastor speak into the lives of his Black congregants if his racial identity creates limitations and regulations? Christian is an identity, an important identity. And so pastors cannot neglect our Christian identity to cater to our Blackness. It is just as important as our Black identity. So this is what it might look like in I guess, a multicultural setting. The pastor could demonstrate an understanding that whenever he or she hears from me, she is going to be getting feedback from the Black perspective. At no point when I'm contributing to the kingdom am I doing it as someone else or as anyone else other than my whole self. I am a Black, young, conservative woman who was raised in the urban area by 2 police officers. And getting to know me, the pastor should already know this. So if he and I both know this, why do we need to state the obvious in conversation? Why would he need to say, I am asking you this, Krystl, or I want you here because you offer a Black woman's perspective? Now I feel more so purposely invited, strategically invited, rather than wholeheartedly welcomed. That's the unintentional consequence of you minimizing my involvement or qualifying my perspective by race. When pastors do something like this to anyone who's different, they give that person a job, a standard, and an identity to live into in order to remain in relationship with them. Secondly, this may also require a pastor to grow his own circle of Black friends. I know this will seem sensible thing to do because Black people know other Black people, just like young people know other young people, and tennis players know other tennis players, and whatever. But it should never be the expectation or the added responsibility for that Black person to recruit or bring other Black voices to the table. Now you're giving them another job, another burden to be in relationship with you. And I guess lastly, what I'll say.
Their role is defined not by them as an individual, but solely by them. Your role is a Black person, the Black person here is the position at the church council or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes you joke and you bring up race, but I'm saying when it becomes a defined role, that is the big issue. Because people need to lighten up. But lastly, I was going to say I would not ever oppose to Black History Month, but can I offer a caveat? And it is that the stories and even the plight of African Americans will never mean anything to a congregation if we do not first celebrate the sanctity of human life 2 Sundays before that. It is a biblical truth that Black lives matter, Black lives, preborn lives, immigrant lives. The problem is, even for us as Christians, we don't act like it. From the pulpit often, or if not every Sunday, we should be teaching our congregations that all lives matter.
Amen. Well, so let's, going from the present to looking forward, you and I, we've both been again elected to this next general conference, supposedly meeting next year. And I'm a leader of one renewal group. You recently completed a term as a member of the WCA Council and Wesleyan Covenant Association, that is. And we're both members of the millennial generation who we want to have work towards a better church and a better society for our children. So let's say that there is this big denominational split at General Conference next year, so that you have one denomination that is generally more theologically evangelical and globally oriented, another that is more dominated by Western perspectives and more theologically liberal. And what are your hopes for how the global evangelical Methodist denomination would address matters of racism and racial injustice in the future, and how, particularly in the US portion of this denomination, how this denomination may change and evolve in the future as the United States' own ethnic demographics keep changing.
Okay. I often joke with people, and I think I joked with you last time we spoke, that the new church needs to start teaching its congregation how to speak Spanish. And even though I'm joking, it is our reality that our children need to be prepared for a country that will soon be 60% Hispanic. John, because we are friends, I'm hoping that maybe even offline, we can come up with a shared vision or bring other people to the table for a shared vision, because that's the only way this unity thing will work. And I think that as friends, that you and I can demonstrate this for the rest of the world. I'm going to just throw two things into the hat. You know that I uphold the scriptural authority. You know that Jesus is my Lord, Savior, and King. So I will not give a theological perspective on this. It's going to really talk about conversations of racism. I think that it's very hard for people to talk about racism. It doesn't matter what color they are, or even to acknowledge racial tension. So I hope that in our new denomination, there's space for us to work and even wrestle out the tension and concerns. Me and my fiance, we both are Bible-believing Christians, and we share a lot of the same values. But when we both saw what happened to George Floyd in the same room, we had different reactions. We both agreed that he did not deserve to die. So we took that argument off the table. Why did we do that? Because it's a discussion closer. If nothing else matters other than he did not need to die, what will we learn? How can we grow to understand what happened, why people are angry, or how to right this wrong? So we chose to wrestle through other opinions that were different to each other. And it was in search of us to have some, better understanding, and also to make sense of the world. We saw things differently. Him and I still were able to come to the table for dinner together later, and we remained a united front in front of both of our families. We did not let the issue penetrate our union, the commitment that we have for one another, nor the commitment we plan on making before God in front of our whole family this summer. And similarly, I hope that the church remains committed to this conversation, even though people say things that you're not going to like or want to hear. The other thing that I think that I would like to do is, and it's mostly a challenge, because I hope the new denomination is going to be willing to address Black on Black crime or other issues in the community. We are a missional church, so we need to engage this issue. And I'm only pressing this because whenever police brutality is raised as an issue in our annual conference, it is always countered with, well, you need to first go, fix the crime and the issues within the Black community. We need to talk about what Black people are doing with other Black people. And so my response to that is, if the church truly think that what's going on in the Black community is an issue, then let's come together and do something about it. Black Lives Matter is a signal cry. It is saying that Black Americans are hurting. It's a call for the church to have compassion on us, not favor us, not to do things for us at the expense of other races. It's just saying, love us, cry with us, and then act on it. I believe that if Black men, fatherhood, and what's happening in Black households became a vested interest of the church, the world will be a much better place. And you know me, I always say, I think manhood, period, fatherhood, period, and what happens in the home, working with families, period, will make the world a better place. But I want to single that out for this conversation, especially since we said, how can the church address issues that our Black brothers and sisters are dealing with? Yes, I just identified, but at the end of our message.
Well, thank you, Krystl. And again, as you say, this is not an end point of a nice YouTube video, but hopefully can continue to encourage greater conversations, between you and I as friends, but
Absolutely.
also between others in our church who've maybe, particularly others who've maybe stayed away from or been nervous of talking about these kinds of issues, to even if we don't, as you say, agree right away, that we can stay in conversation of working together to make things better.
Thank you. And again, thank you for using your platform and also sharing your platform with me and other people that you felt needed to share and speak to your audience.
Well, thank you. Thank you for making the time to be here. Blessings.
Blessings. Bye.